Okay, welcome back to the 2S Horror Quarters podcast for another true crime episode that is about 50 miles east of the East Los Angeles area into Riverside, the city of Riverside particularly. And we're going to get into the case of the unsolved murder of Cheri Jo Bates. The body of Cheri Jo Bates was found on October 31st, 1966, approximately 6:32 in the morning, on the grounds of Riverside City College. To this day, it is unsolved, and it is still gaining national attention. It is still a very popular topic, primarily because of its potential attachment to the Zodiac. A lot of people believe that this is Zodiac's first kill, first murder. I mean, a lot of people don't believe it, but a lot of people do. The Cheri Jo Bates case was mentioned in the movie Zodiac, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. So we're going to delve into that case a bit to try and maybe figure this thing out. Just about 3 weeks ago, when we were still working on this particular episode, the Press Enterprise put out an article stating that an anonymous donor pledged $50,000 for a reward into this unsolved murder of Cheri Jo Bates. So I guess now is a good time to finish this and get this out. Maybe it'll jog a few memories. Perhaps somebody, though it's going to be almost 55 years, well, it'll be 55 years on October 31st, but maybe this will jog someone's memory. Maybe somebody will actually talk now and maybe lead to an arrest, or at least lead to some kind of information as to who did it, how, why, so on and so forth. I wanted to get into Cheri Jo Bates' movements on the day before her body was found, and this would be October 30th, 1966. Now, based on witness accounts and police reports, what we do know is that Cheri and her father attended Mass at St. Catherine's Church, which was a nearby church. After Mass, they went to eat at a restaurant called Sandy's. All of this was nearby in close proximity to each other. After breakfast, Joseph heads to the beach area. Cheri most likely went home. Sometime in the mid-afternoon, Cheri reached out to one of her co-workers to ask about a term paper. Sometime around that same time, Cheri reaches out to a second friend to invite her to the library to join her. That second friend declined. Joseph returns around 5 p.m. And when he gets there, he notices that Cheri's gone, but she did leave a note pinned to the refrigerator, which said Dad went to RCC library. Joseph at some point leaves the house again and leaves a note for his daughter himself. When he returns to the house around midnight, he sees that the note is unmoved. The house still looks the same, so most likely it has not been read. He wasn't quite as concerned at this point, so he goes to sleep, wakes up in the morning, and Cheri is still not there. Now he's extremely concerned. He reaches out to one of her friends. One of her friends has no clue where Cheri's at, so now Joseph calls the police department. And it was a little bit after this that a groundskeeper at Riverside City College named Cleophas Martin, while on his street sweeper, came across the body of Cheri. She was laying face down on a gravel driveway in between two vacant homes. So here's one of the original crime scene photos. You can see Cheri's body there to the right. I have it blurred out a touch, but the gravel driveway that we're looking at intersects that alley there. And to the right of that, right where it intersects and tees, you can see Cheri laying there. To the left, where you see the detective and the officer there, is one of the annex homes that was vacant, that would be used by the library to house excess library books. And across the gravel pathway there, you can see the second house, which was also vacant. Now the camera itself is facing away from the football field, so the back of the photographer is facing the scoreboard that you will see in the reverse pictures of Cheri laying there. And then across from Teresina is the scoreboard and the football field. Here's a Google Earth shot of where Cheri lived and the distance between her home and RCC. Now in this straight line there, we're not running through all the streets that get there, but just a straight line across, you can see how close it was to the college. 2.98 miles, we'll just call it 3 miles from RCC to Cheri's home. Here is a current aerial shot from Google Earth of RCC. I may have cut off some of the campus. I don't think I did, but I may have. But as you can see now, it's a very large campus. And from this perspective, this is where the crime scene was, right here. So here is the intersection of Magnolia and Terracina. So facing Terracina, if you make a right, you will head onto campus there. And if you were to make a left from this angle, you would walk up this sidewalk here, and this sidewalk going up Terracina leads right to the crime scene and to the library. And to the right here is also the general area of the former Shelley Lynn apartments. And here we are with some aerial footage of RCC now as it stands in 2021. Here we're on Terracina Drive, and the library at the time was on the Terracina Drive of the quadrangle to the right. Shout out and much thanks to Jose Gomez on the aerial footage. Did another incredible job for us. It's been reported that the Sandy's restaurant, the former Sandy's restaurant where Cheri and her father Joseph ate on October 30th, 1966, was at 5201 Arlington Avenue. Now, it's been said that this parking lot here where the Starbucks is the parking lot that Sandy's once stood, but I looked into it a little deeper, and directly across the street is the odd side of the address. So 5201 would be across the street here in this large parking lot of this vacant Sears building. The Sandy's restaurant probably sat right here in this parking lot somewhere. Now, I could be wrong. It could be across the street where that Starbucks is, but based on what the addresses say now, and I know it's 55 years later, the odd addresses would be across the street here in this wide open parking lot. Here we are at 3564 Central Avenue in Riverside, California. This is the Hayden building now, but this was the Riverside National Bank where Cheri worked. Here we are at St. Catherine of Alexandria Church at 3680 Arlington Avenue, Riverside, California. This is the church that Cheri and her father Joseph attended the morning of October 30th, 1966. And this is also the church where Cheri's funeral services were held. Cheri was laid to rest at Crestline Memorial Park on November 4th, 1966. Years later, for reasons unknown, Cheri's family had her exhumed, cremated, and spread her ashes out to sea. So let's get to the timeline on the RCC campus. We do know that the library was open from 6 to 9. Now, there was a male student who actually knew Cheri, and he said he arrived around 5:30 p.m. waiting for the library to open. Once he walked in, it was then that he noticed Cheri inside, specifically writing in a blue spiral notebook. The library is said to be small and cramped at the time, so based on what I've seen, anyone that's there is probably going to be seen by anybody else that's there. A second male, a librarian, claimed to also have seen Cheri inside the library around this time. Between 6:10 and 6:15, a friend of Cheri's claims to have seen her driving on Magnolia towards RCC. The friend waved. Cheri didn't wave back, probably because she didn't see her. A military man, described as an Air Force man, claims to have seen Cheri as well, driving up an alley parallel to the library, and followed by maybe what appeared to be a 1960 Oldsmobile. Now, logically, I know the times mentioned don't really jive up or add up based on the two library witnesses who said they saw her a little earlier. I kind of attribute that to just missed times. Times can be off by a few minutes here and there. So I still believe that the two males at the library did see Cheri. I just think the times are off somewhere between them and the girl who saw Cheri driving on Magnolia, as well as the military man. Between 6:30 and 6:40 p.m., there were some friends of Cheri's that were already inside of the library, and they claimed they did not see her at all. And again, this was a small library. We do know that Cheri checked out 3 books from the library as they were found in her car on the passenger seat. Between 7:15 and 9 p.m., another friend of Cheri's by the name of Walter Siebert, he was already inside of the library with some other friends. They all said they did not see Cheri in that timeline. So that's an hour and 45 minutes that they were there. Now it's 9 p.m. The library closes and students exit. No one reports seeing Cheri leaving, but they do report that her vehicle is still there. Now also around 7:15, there were 4 men hanging out at the fence across and near where Cheri parked her vehicle. They were dressed in work clothes. These 4 men were questioned by the police and said they did see Cheri near her car around 6 p.m. It's to be noted that these 4 men did not see anyone approach her vehicle, approach Cheri, tamper with her car, or anything like that. They also didn't see her walking with anyone. Now remember Walter Siebert, who was at the library between 7:15 and 9 o'clock. He said he saw the men there at 7:15 across from Cheri's car, so they were still there at 7:15, but these 4 men did not see Cheri past, I think, 6 o'clock, somewhere along there. The library closes and the students exit. No one reports seeing Cheri Jo Bates leave. Her car was still there, and the way it was parked, at least the way that I interpreted the information, her car was parked facing the library, so I would guess her driver's side door was to the concrete. This isn't confirmed. This is just based on my interpretation of what my research told me. Cheri drove a 1960 lime green VW Beetle or Bug. Parked directly behind her Beetle, some witnesses said they saw a Tucker torpedo vehicle. Now the Tucker torpedo, this is where it gets a little tricky. There were only 51 of those made total before the company itself folded, and I think they folded in 1951. So to see that torpedo there, though it's possible, it's probably not as probable. So authorities suggested that because the torpedo resembles a Studebaker Champion, the front end of it does, that perhaps it was a Studebaker Champion that was parked behind her vehicle. The Studebaker Champion may very well not be associated with any crime at all. It might have been just somebody parked there. So let's move on to 9:30. There's a female student walking on that alley, passing that gravel pathway where Cheri's body was found, and she claims to have seen a man standing there smoking a cigarette in the dark, in the shadows. I guess they nodded or maybe had a small quick hello to each other, and the student kept walking. So police confirmed her story because they did find a cigarette butt in that alley. If this was the man responsible for Cheri's murder, was she already dead at that point? It was 9:30 and he was just tucking her away so no one would see. Maybe he heard the female student approaching, so he just had to pretend he was just standing there normally smoking a cigarette. Maybe Cheri was still alive and he had gagged her somehow, or maybe she was unconscious at that point. Now if Cheri was in the restraints from this man smoking a cigarette at 9:30, this would make the most sense because the witnesses between 10:15 and 10:40 p.m. at the nearby Shelley Lynn apartments, there was 2 witnesses that claimed to have heard a scream between 10:15 and 10:45. One witness said they heard a scream, then a couple of minutes of silence, then an older vehicle start up and take off. A second witness said that they heard a scream, a woman's scream, at about 10:30. In my opinion, if Cheri was subdued by this guy in the alley there smoking a cigarette, maybe she came to around 10:15, 10:30, and then he actually did kill her at that point, in which in turn we would hear the screams. And then approximately 6:30 a.m. the next morning, Halloween morning, Cleophas Martin found her. Cleophas was a groundskeeper at RCC.